Hello and welcome back to Bad Teachers Podcast, where teachers struggle, but we struggle together. Today we have in the news, and we're going to talk about Aime Cesaire, Discourse on Colonialism, and again, what that means for teachers. I'm not prescribing how to teach or even to teach this book, but I want to use it as a foundational text for everything that we do in our classrooms, no matter what that age level is and no matter what that course is. Science, math, social studies, world language, etc. This is going to be an anchor text for everything that we do in this class. So I needed to start off with defining what Cesaire says colonialism is, because I'm going to be throwing this word around for the rest of the time of this podcast. And I think it's really good to start with Aime Cesaire. And so let's get into it. First, I'm going to share in the news little Waterloo, Iowa stuff. It's always something going on in my hometown. And I don't think that we have critical journalism. So I want to be a little bit more critical with what we're reading. It says 6 Black Hawk County inmates charged in riot on Tuesday. So I'm going to read this little excerpt and then we're going to analyze it. So Sheriff Nathan Neff says, "This is the first time we've had anything of this magnitude in my 32 years at the sheriff's office. It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can become volatile in a jail setting. That's what makes this profession so stressful. Security staff must always be on alert because even the most mundane shift can turn violent in a heartbeat." So let's talk about what he does to kind of elicit an emotional response, and it invites you to take the side of power, right? It invites you to take the side of the institution of policing in the United States. So he uses words like "in my 32 years," which gives him ground to stand on, right? He says, "So you should believe me because I'm a sheriff. I have this title. I've been here for 32 years. And I'm telling you," this magnitude is a strong word too. "I'm telling you that there's been nothing even close to it." So again, that's already kind of leading you up to feeling like, whoa, I wonder, magnitude seems like a big word. It seems like a scary word. They had to feel if it was this shuddering, right? Or earth shaking, earth quaking, like we think of magnitude when we think of earthquakes. And if it was this upsetting, the intent is to feel bad for the sheriff, the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office. He says words like volatile in a jail setting, and then the word security is also always something like a boom, boom, ding, 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 like watch out, because if we think about the history of the institution of policing in the United States, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face, and I will say this again, the institution of policing comes from, in the United States, it emerges as a way to ensure that there are no runaway enslaved people. So the institution of policing was meant from its inception to ensure and perpetuate the institution of chattel slavery and to protect the so-called property of the enslavers. Because remember, human beings, African human beings, were not considered human. They were, by the Europeans, enslavers, they were considered property. So they had value in their labor. But what makes it a little bit different from capitalism is that it was free labor rather than a wage labor. And so the value was in their labor. And so their value was in their bodies and then their ability to work. And so this was also a coordinated effort, not only with institutions of policing, which are paid for by tax dollars. So we are complicit in the fact that we just work. So we're complicit in the institution of policing because we're paying for it with very little resistance. And then also alongside vigilantes. So these are your teachers, your workers, even your very poor white people that work alongside of the police. Today in modern day time, it's those white ladies that call, "I'm so scared in the park," or any, people who call the police under the premise that this is a sense of protection, this is security, this is safety, rather than surveillance and rather than a protection of property, which we do know that laws and the system of policing is to protect property and the wealth and the value and of the rich. And so it is not to ensure that the most marginalized feel safe. It is so that the rich feel safe in their communities from the people who may want to take what they have stolen from the working class. So they know, so they set up these institutions because they know there's going to be resistance, because they know what they're doing is bullshit and exploitative. And so they have to make sure that from every angle, not only is there manufactured consent, so not only do we read this and, you know, instantly associate and empathize with the sheriff, but we also have no problem with, you know, them taking our part of our wages. They're already being exploited, taking them for taxes. Again, so we quote unquote feel safe from the quote unquote bad guys. And then we just need to question, like, why are the bad people, the criminals, disproportionately Black and brown, and connecting that to chattel slavery in the United States. And so, like, this idea of, like, they must be alert. It's so stressful. I mean, these are words of emotion that are meant for us to not even question why there would be 6 people who strategically planned an event that was a act of resistance, that was a moment or an action of resistance. Failure or not, their voices and their stories need to be told. And so I'm interested in how we can get interviews with them. It's just time consuming and it's hard, you know, to be in communication with inmates, but I have reached out to the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier to see if they're interested in collaborating on getting that project done. Because this isn't just like you know, an Aaron Bushnell light myself up, although, you know, somebody that I also hold dearly in my heart. I just don't think that's a good strategy as far as how to actually win power. But this is something that we need to continue to look at, continue to follow, not only this one incident, but all of the incidents where inmates take power and have strategical movements of resistance that are collective actions. So this, you know, we think about the Delaney ICE detention concentration camp where they were on a hunger strike, etc. So this isn't just happening. This isn't just isolated. And I think that matters. And I want to know their why. And I think that their voices need to be heard too, because they're the victims here of the institution of policing, of the criminal punishment system. They're all African American males. And so I want to know what conditions provoked this event, because human beings don't resist being content, being well fed, being around family and friends. They resist being encaged. They resist being treated less than human. And so I would like to know the details of their side of the story. So, because they're doing, you know, they're flooding pods, they're blocking cameras. Oh, poor things, $1,500 in damage. When, like, nobody even asked for that jail anyways. It's right in the middle of downtown, so it's like a constant reminder of what can happen if you just aren't complicit, right, in the system. And so clogging toilets, refuse to return to their cells, using mattresses, blankets, and garbage cans to form barricades. And again, of course, the standoff was going to end because they were fighting against the state. So they were fighting against numbers. They were fighting against less lethal munitions. This is another red flag word. Less lethal doesn't mean that it can't kill you. So it's just a euphemism for a lethal weapon. That's not like maybe an automatic AK-47. They also use tasers and physical force. And so we need to make sure that the story of the victim is centered, which is the inmates. They're the ones that are encaged. They're the ones that did not have weapons to defend themselves. They're the ones who felt that their conditions were so dire that they would do anything necessary, risk their freedom, including to make a statement so their voices were heard. And I mean, one of them bit somebody, a sheriff or something, spit the blood back in their face. This is human behavior of people who are tired, right? Who are not free, who feel like they don't have a voice. And so I want to hear more about this. All right. I also wanted to let you guys know about this Free the Future Advanced Leaders Organizing Training, August 15th and 16th through AROS, the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools. You guys can sign up for it right here. It is a program, a 2-day virtual training that covers community organizing skills, and that can be applied on any sort of local to national level to defend, protect, and strengthen public education. So it's outreach and building a base, building an organizing committee, defining and mapping power, planning effective action, and leadership development strategies. I will be attending this. Here is the website to get signed up. And, you know, being committed to bring together a team of 10 to 20 public school supporters. So I wanted to bring that up. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share the page. Make sure you email me at badteacher319@gmail.com if you want to be on the show. All right, now we are going to transition into Aime Cesaire. So I was going to just because, you know, Amy Goodman says it better, I will start right now with sharing. I will start right now with sharing. What?
Legal director of the Colorado ACLU. I want to thank you both for being with us. As we wrap up now with the death of Aime Cesaire, the esteemed poet, writer, politician, and anti-colonial activist from Martinique who died last Thursday at 94 years old. He is revered in the Francophone world as a leading figure in the movement of Black consciousness and pride, which he called negritude. Cesaire was also a politician for a large part of his life. The Caribbean island of Martinique is administratively and politically a region of France, and its residents are French citizens. Cesaire served as the mayor of Martinique's capital and the elected representative to the French Constituent Assembly for close to half a century. French President Nicolas Sarkozy led thousands of mourners at an official state funeral Sunday for Cesaire in Martinique. But in 2005, Cesaire had refused to meet Sarkozy because of a new law Sarkozy had proposed emphasizing the positive legacy of French colonialism. Cesaire's use of culture to fight colonialism and racism influenced generations of activists and writers around the world. Fellow Martinican author and revolutionary Frantz Fanon considered Cesaire to be his mentor. Today we'll speak with Professor Robin Kelly about.
All right, and so we are not going to speak with Professor Robin Kelly, but I do encourage you to watch this show about him, honoring him in his passing. But some things that Robin Kelly kind of touched on is that Aime Cesaire really worked to demolish the notion that poets can't be good politicians. And he, as Amy Goodman stated, was the founder of the negritude movement that not only recognized that Africa had value on its own terms, and that African pride and joy should be celebrated in the diaspora, but that wasn't enough. That we needed to move past what we're in modernity into a post-colonial society, and you know, he says that in colonialism it takes out all sorts of, it makes things impossible that are not impossible, and so it like because of the silences, right? And so it wipes out extraordinary possibilities. And so we need to continue to think of those alternatives, keep those possibilities open, and continue to talking about those possibilities so it doesn't seem like they're impossible. So post-colonialism or any system outside of colonialism is possible, and that was one of his big contributions. And another major contribution of his is that cultures of Africa, Asia actually represent anti-capitalism, not only in the sense of opposition to capitalism, but also before capitalism. So a lot of the answers for how to transform society to post-colonial society or a post-capitalist society, which are sometimes conflated, and they are different, but they work together. And so, yeah, so we're going to do that without really defining that, and I apologize. But so the answers need to come from those places that have been colonized. And then another thing that I think that is super important to talk about when we talk about Aime Cesaire is that he did a good job, because I think a lot of the times we think of colonialism at, this is what Europeans have done to the colonized, rather than flipping the script and saying, well, what does colonialism do to the colonizers? And we'll get into that, what he says. But I think that was interesting. And so his wife, I always like to talk about the wives because I think that they also get kind of like lost. But these people, like, they have some killer ass wives. Her name was Suzanne Cesaire. I wanted to share this journal that she was an editor of that was co-founded with her husband and a couple other people. It's called Tropique. They are French speaking because they were on the island of Martinique. So they're from Martinique in the African diaspora. And it is still a colony of France, as Amy Goodman stated. But I will share this resource for you. And this was co-founded in 1941, and I think lasted till 1944. 14 issues, 45. So it was working with surrealist and negritude ideas, and the journal saw them as a tool towards the realization of a project of Martinician literacy and cultural production. And then I wanted to show you where Martinique was. It's this little island right here. And it is a colony of France. And if we zoom out a little bit, we can see how close it is to South America. And way up here, we have the Midwest, Iowa, little Iowa, where I'm at. Okay. So Aime Cesaire, I wanted to share this with you as well, because Aime Cesaire says this is right after World War II when he writes a discourse on colonialism. And so he really highlights what colonization does to Europeans, because this is after Nazi Germany, where the Holocaust happened. And so they're saying, like, it's really when the chickens come home to roost. It's really when that imperialism comes back onto the people that are in the belly of the beast, if you will, that are in the Europe or in settler colonial lands like the United States. And so he's saying, through all this, so-called progress and through all this so-called civilization, we've created barbarians. And in fact, the colonizers themselves are animals, considering the material ways that they act, right? And the way that they have dehumanized other human beings, then in fact makes them the actual inferior people and just outright evil. So I wanted to share this because I think that Katie Halper, she's a journalist. I recommend you check her out. I think her podcast is called Useful Idiots. She might have others too. But she is a Jewish American who is anti-Zionist and fights for Palestinian rights. And she was very hesitant to compare Nazi Germany with the genocide in Palestine right now. A lot of people are, because it's like, can't these moments just live for themselves and be sufficient without being compared to other, egregious moments of history? But she is now kind of saying that it's undeniable that settler colonization, or in this case, settler colonization, which we're going to get into later on. What is settler colonialism? How they're learning. They learn from each other, and that's what kind of makes it so difficult to overthrow Israel, because they've learned from all of these other moments of colonization in the past to perfect the craft and the strategy of oppression and genocide.
no pleasure to compare what Israel's doing to what the Nazis did. But how can we not? Because you have things like ghettos, you have things like starvation, you have things like concentration camps, you have things like the planned, systematic extermination of people. Now, a lot of people talk about the banality of evil. There was a real cold detachment, industrialized murder of Jews and others during the Holocaust. What's so disturbing about what Israel is doing and the IDF is doing is that they are doing it with glee. And unlike the Nazis, they're not hiding it. And we know this because they document this. They document not just the war crimes.
So one moment, when she says they're not hiding it, Cesaire in Discourse on Colonialism on page 10 of the copy that I have, he says that colonialism is fundamentally hypocrisy, and it becomes more odious and odious because it is less likely to deceive. So that's what she's kind of saying is because of the less likeliness to deceive, because we've also learned from history, it ramps up and becomes even more egregious.
Crimes, but they document their glee. You even have Israeli soldiers themselves comparing themselves to Nazis. One of them said, "I felt like a Nazi. It looked exactly like we were the Nazis and they were the Jews." They, of course.
So I will remind you, just in case you don't know, a quick history. After World War II, so the Zionist Project by Theodor Herzl, he had a lot of pamphlets and books and stuff on Zionism. And this movement was starting to get larger and larger. And it was this idea that the Jewish people of Europe were not welcome there. There was nowhere for them to go. United States wasn't taking them. European countries didn't want them either. And so they needed a land for a people without a land. And they wanted to create, it was this national project, this national Jewish project. They thought about putting it in other places around the world, like Argentina. And there was some other, land up for grabs, if you will. Not necessarily up for grabs, but we're not going to get into that. And so these people that are now in Palestine are there in this, for this national project of Jewish people after World War II to say, never again. The problem with Palestine is it was already there and there was already people there. So they didn't just go to those this desolate land where nobody was inhabiting and didn't have 2,000-3,000 years of a society built up. They went to somewhere with a rich cultural history, a rich, everything, a culture, an education system, mosques, churches. There was Christians. There was Orthodox Jews. There was it's predominantly Arab, so they practice Islam place. It was part of the Ottoman Empire prior to that. But then when the Allies won World War II and then got that territory, it became a British mandate and under British rule, essentially, and it was supposed to be transitioned into independence. But in the meantime, British and French troops worked with the European Jews to commit a genocide on the Palestinian people. And then that project became materialized and it became and Israeli became a recognized nation state by the United Nations in the world in 1948. Although the genocide that was being committed started earlier than that. And so that's the kind of the hypocrisy of it is these same people that a genocide had been committed on by Nazi Germany onto the Jewish people, Ashkenazi Jews, which are European descended Jews for the most part, then now are doing the same thing to the Palestinian Arab people.
Being Palestinians. Another soldier said it is justified and in fact essential to learn from every possible source, even, however shocking it may sound, how the German army fought in the Warsaw Ghetto. So there we have Israeli soldiers literally learning from Nazi tactics and comparing themselves explicitly to the Nazis.
So Cesaire on this says that, but before they were its victims, they were its accomplices.
And the Palestinians to the Jews. Ironically, according to the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism, it is anti-Semitic to, quote, draw comparisons between contemporary Israeli policies to that of the Nazis. So I guess those soldiers are themselves anti-Semitic, according to this definition. Another point of comparison, although it's actually
another thing I wanted to bring up with the anti-Semitism and then weaponizing the word anti-Semitism is that Arab people are also Semites. So I'll just leave that there.
Point of departure is the relationship between the genocide and public opinion. In Israel, however, everyone knows what's happening. It's documented by legacy media, it's documented by social media, and yet the vast majority of Israelis think that the government is using either an appropriate amount of force or not enough force against the Palestinians. It brings me no pleasure to compare what is.
Okay. So I wanted to, again, I thought that video was kind of telling about colonization. And again, the project in Palestine is a settler colonial project because it is the idea, the main difference is that in settler colonization, they are there to stay. And in colonization, it is to extract the resources, kind of stay, you know, stay on the, in the aristocrat type, corporate type level and never really have the intention of colonizing that, like living on that land. Like in the United States, it's settler colonialism because those Europeans now have stayed here and committed genocide against the Native American people and enslaved the African American people to lead us to the society now where we have white supremacy, and then by all measurements, the white race you know, gets the highest test scores in schools, maybe except Asian Americans, which the model minority kind of premise that we use for that. Highest paid workers. By the way, the Jewish community in the United States is the highest minority group as far as wealth goes. So just, again, we need to think about that when we think about what is anti-Semitism and what is oppression. When we're talking about some of the richest people in the world also. And there are, you know, Jewish Voices for Peace. So there are many organizations of people, Jewish people who are anti-Zionist. And so even though the majority of people who claim to be Israeli, although I don't think that Israel has a right to exist, I don't think that any nation state has a right to exist. That's never been the premise that we've set. If that was the case, then how did any of this come to exist, and how does anything ever fall like a nation state fall and become something else? And I also think that it's against the Geneva Conventions not only to commit a genocide on a people, but apartheid state is also illegal according to international law, and ethno states are also illegal according to international law. And so this, you know, it goes back to what Cesaire says, thinking of the project in the United States, Australia, and now in Palestine, what some people call Israel. It's this idea that they're not put into contact with each other. So the colonized and the colonizers have this infinite distance between them. They're not like, you know, having a good time together. They're purposefully segregated. In this case, in apartheid, right? So there's certain laws for a certain group of people based off their race or ethnicity or whatever, could be religion, anything. And so it's this idea that a lot of the settlers, even in Israel, you'll hear Israelis or, you know, the invaders, the colonizers say, I mean, even me, for in their defense, it's like they never even knew the Palestinian people in their tents that had been displaced from their homes. Like they never knew that was their grandparents, their grandpa, that busted down their doors with a gun that was, you know, British weapon, and said, you either get out now or we'll kill you. And this is our shit. And so they were able to, when, you know, go through a system of schooling, elementary through high school, and they never knew what was on the other side of those fences. They were never taught that the Israeli people would rearrange the water system so that the Palestinian people wouldn't have access to water. And if they did, they had to go through Israel territory. I mean, you should see, I'm trying not to talk about Palestine right now, but you should see the way that it is partitioned, the land. It's like, when I understood how it was partitioned, I understood it to be like, this area is of Israel. This area is of Palestine. No, it's like little dots on a map. And so it's impossible for Palestinians to even move from one place to another in Palestine without going through these checkpoints. And Susan Abu Awa told a story one time that when her brothers and her were where they were going to visit cousins, the Israeli soldiers made them spit in each other's mouth and would not let them cross that checkpoint until they made a goal, is how they said it. So like, we're talking about from every level possible of the way that way that colonization works to separate people, even if they're in the same physical place, quote unquote. If you think in the United States and you think of redlining, segregation, can't drink from the same water fountains. This is what Cesaire is talking about when he's talking about that these people aren't in contact with each other. And it's not, and this is an imposed identity. So it's not like, well, we get to decide who's going to be the colonizers and the colonized. It is something that has been very racialized because it had to be with chattel slavery. So originally, white people were also enslaved in the sense that it was called indentured servitude, but they were in contact. I mean, they were working right alongside enslaved African people. And then when there were a lot of revolts that were happening because of the unity of indentured servants and enslaved African people, the white colonists were like, okay, we have to do something about this because just in sheer numbers and, the powerful ideologies that they have against their oppressors, they will take us over like they can, like it was already happening. And so they said, we have to make sure that the poor white people want to hang on to their whiteness over their freedom. And so, I mean, there was a lot of things that happened in order for that project to get materialized. And again, one of those things was inventing the social construct of race and saying that if you are considered Black according to the census, again, this is a national identity, this is a racialized identity. So it matters as far as like on the census, right? It's documented. If you are Black, then you are an enslaved person. You have no citizenship in the United States. And if you are white, you have citizenship. And therefore you have all of the things that citizenship grants you, like, the right to vote, even though there was literacy laws, but we're not going to get into that. So there's, so that's my whole point is like, white people need to realize that we're choosing crumbs over liberation in order to maintain white superiority, but we're not reaping the benefits of white supremacy. In little ways we are, and we do have to be willing to sacrifice those little ways of privilege, but I'm white. I've been around a lot of white people, and there's some serious issues in white communities that are swept under the rug. So I will just say that I am not going to continue to act like white supremacy has really garnered any type of benefit for the working class, especially if we consider that on whose backs, right? On the backs of the Black and brown people. And so I am not willing to accept, I'm not even willing to accept $1 billion to oppress anybody else. And we really have to be steadfast in that ideology and end it there. So there's nothing that you could give me in order for me to say that colonization is okay, or that treating people as less than is okay, or saying that enslaving a human being is okay. So let's kind of move on with what Cesaire says in Discourses on Colonialism. He says that, by now, and this is the 1950s, but he says by now there's no way that if we didn't want to establish a concept of rights of all men and a system of individual ethics that actually got rid of poverty in general, got rid of homelessness altogether, got rid of oppression altogether, that we could not do that. He's saying that colonization is by design meant to not progress. It's by design meant to underdevelop Asian and African countries. He said that Europeanization was already happening. So people, and I kind of talked about this and with the Christian Crusades, is people were already in, contact. we were already learning from each other. We were already in conversations, and we were already taking each other's ideas and saying, hey, I like that. I want to adopt that in my own community. This is a good idea. This can bring education to the people, etc. The problem with colonization is, as this exchange of knowledge and ways of structuring society were happening, colonization interrupts that, impedes that, and says, oh, no, no, no. You can't have progress. You guys can't have schools. We're going to make sure we do everything in our power to keep you guys docile, oppressed, and under our rule. So whether that, that's economically, politically, and spiritually. And so, we, again, when we think about all of the movements of African people or indigenous people to demand schools, like in the United States, Native people have the right of education in their own right, with their own languages and their own histories. Instead, we give them boarding schools with nuns, and they weren't allowed to speak their home languages. They were learning European history, you guys. They were made to assimilate or die. They were brutally beaten. There's grave sites of kids of Native American people. The parents had to hide their kids if they didn't want them taken to be schooled. So it wasn't that Native people weren't already educating their kids. If they weren't educating their kids, then they wouldn't be trying to hide them from the government that was going to take them. And so that's kind of what he's saying is, what does that mean for the European people, the nuns and the teachers who, like, did they think they were doing something good? And what does that make them? When you kill a child or beat a child because they're not acting Christian enough, or they don't want to cut their hair, that makes you an animal. That makes you the sicko. That makes you the barbarian. And so a lot of it is projection to me. So a lot of it is, and people do this all the time. It's like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. You're cheating on me. And it inevitably is what the person is doing themselves. So when white people use animal terms to describe a marginalized person, that is because we are actually enacting materially the actions of an animal. When we disproportionately criminalize Black and brown people, we are in fact enacting materializing what the definition of a criminal is, right? We are using power to oppress. That's criminal. Killing civilians in the street, engaging human beings for minor crimes and having nothing proactive in place so that this doesn't happen at all, that's criminal. Colonization, one of the mechanisms is to pathologize. So, like Draptotami, there's Datichoslephaly. Oh my God, you guys, that's so embarrassing. I can't pronounce these words. I should have prepared a little bit better, but it's a sense that, like, even in the institution of health, of medicine, doctors, nurses, diagnose an enslaved person with a psychological disability of wanting to be free. It was the one of, like, why would they want to escape? They have everything they need here. Why would the oppressed want to not be oppressed? No, they're just crazy. They're crazy. I've been called crazy all my life. I'm not comparing at all. I'm just saying it comes home to roost. So white people, if we think that white supremacy will concede for what's right and even ethics. Even Europeans have the power of what ethics is. What is science? And so, right, that just, like, then ask a question, like, this is what I was saying earlier about, like, the philosophers of Persia, let's say, where the European scholar learned the language, now has that knowledge, brought it back and put their name on it. And now still to this day, teachers are teaching it like they pulled it out of their behinds. And this is over and over and over. So Cesaire says it's not to return to a dead society, but it's to go beyond, right? It's to believe in the possibilities, to believe in transformation, to resist against like the obsession with monopolizing, the obsession with thingification. He says that, you know, capitalism alongside colonialism is a thingification, is to objectify everything, right? And everything has to have a value under the capital system, which is then related to a quantitative value of what we call money. And any opposing ideas, Cesaire says, are seen as like, shoo fly, don't bother me. We're not going to deal with that. We're not even going to talk about it. And that's when you get into the silencing of discourses. And we're talking about decent fellows here, right? We're talking about the ones who have some sort of, you know, class, who are understood to be the ones who are the good guy, right? They're nice. They help out their neighbors. They give rights to people they don't know. They give jobs to people who don't have them. They're the good ones. And he says another mechanism is for the bourgeoisie to attempt to reduce the most human problems to comfortable, hollow notions. And so, you know, by theorizing things like there's this dependency complex, then it makes something that tells us about, you know, what colonization and capitalism does in isolating people and resting contact in community and collective consciousness and class consciousness. It takes that from the people, and then pathologizes and said, oh, well, you guys have problems. Or this actual problem that you guys are dealing with is like theorized into oblivion to where you're not even seeing a human body actually suffering anymore. And then he also says something that I really think is interesting about science and ethics. Just give me 1 second to find it. Oh, he says annexed. He uses the word annexed. He says that European colonizers have annexed science and also has claimed ethical and religious superiority. So we always, in this thing, if we think about the missions, it's like, we will build a school where you will teach European history if you go to church and believe in my God. And it's under the premise that they didn't have a religion, but they do. That's very human to have a way of being with the spirit, right? Of being with the universe. It traces back to any type of human society ever. And so, this is colonialism. He talks about the museums, like what is the need of museum? That's then another idea of having no contact. So it's like, you don't have to be around the people, but you can enjoy the artifacts that we have stolen through committing genocide. It would be better, he says, for these people to be at our side as neighbors, dynamic and prosperous, whole and not mutilated, not dead and not scattered parts. But instead, there seems to be this, and I quote, smug self-satisfaction rots in their eyes when a secret contempt for others withers their heart, and racism dries up sympathy. So we need to question the values that were invented by the bourgeois, like what is the man and what is a nation. And so I want us to keep, we're going to use this as foundational text, because I think where I want to end is to consider not only the idea of thingification and how we objectify everything in order to give it some sort of capital value for profit, or in order to not consider it as, spiritual, emotional, neighborly, or any way to connect and be in contact with other people, but also to see, to think about force, brutality, cruelty, sadism, conflict, schooling, hasty manufacturing of a few thousand subordinates. He's talking about boys, artisans, office clerks, interpreters, police, there's taxation, theft, rape, compulsory crops, contempt, mistrust, arrogance, self-complacency, swinishness, brainless elite. Wow, interesting, brainless elite. This degraded masses, only relationships of dominations and submission. The colonizers are in classroom to monitor, prison guards. And, this makes me think of the article in the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier as well. And it makes me think of this. Let me share this. This is a clip from Emancipation with Will Smith, and it's the scene, the runner scene.
Done a minute. So this girl here, some of that cool walk. Come, let us bow our heads. There's an ancient tradition, and I'll tell Bless us, O Lord, and these our gifts, which we are about to receive, from thy bounty, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Run up. 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 Run up.
So I think that clip is fascinating in supporting Cesaire's argument of these, from these vigilantes, right? These people that are working with the state under manufactured consent. So that little girl never even thought twice. The consent was manufactured for her to believe in this relationship of subordination and domination. She wasn't considering that man trying to seek his freedom. We got to do better. We got to teach our daughters different. We can't be complicit, we can't be complicit. And by we, I mean white people. We can't be complicit in the subjugation and the engagement of our fellow neighbors. I mean, this is the mystification of colonization, is this fact that we're not in contact, but we're in the same physical space. So it's a myth that we're in two different worlds or two different dimensions or in two different, we're not breathing each other's air. And again, with all the little, now with all the little mixed babies, we're in contact, y'all. We've been in contact. It's just, what does that contact look like? And, I'm not trying to talk about it too much because it's not my business and I try to stay in my lane, but, this idea of a plurinational, plurinational type of way of organizing where, everybody gets to have their identity and gets to have their community and gets to have their languages within a larger society. So it's like respecting that people don't necessarily want to be integrated. They just don't want to be oppressed. So it's not about us continuing to invade and saying, well, we want to integrate. We want to be around you. We want to learn about your country. We want to learn your language. We want to take up a lot of space. It's really just about letting them be. So in this case, it was just about her stopping. It was about her turning her head to the right. I'm not expecting a 7-year-old to do this, but we as parents and as teachers, we can bring this clip into the classroom. What do you think you would have done? We can challenge our students. If any little white girl would say, I would have definitely not done that, we can challenge that, right? To prepare them better for these moments of resistance so they know what they're doing. And so yeah, we just, let's just keep working. And then I wanted to end with, if the modernity, the Enlightenment, as European tradition calls it, this enlightenment, right? This coming to the light, coming to truth, using science over religion to describe the world by observation and evidence and etc., has been built on a racialized foundation. So colonization and modernity is racism, and it can explain fascism as well. And so we need to reject any type of colonial endeavors as not only benign, but also any type of charitable, any type of benevolent, etc. And we need to continue to work towards what I want to call, instead of enlightened, darkened approach. And so I didn't get this from anywhere. It's one of my favorite articles, actually, that I have read, but we don't have time to really talk about it, but we will eventually. But it's this idea of the way to approach everything is to use an darkened approach. So that means, and I think of the Tao Te Ching, and I think of, sitting in the dark. And in this case, I mean, going as Cesaire urges, is to learn from the colonized people. They are the vanguard. They are the ones that are going to be the leaders out of this catastrophe that we have gotten ourselves into. And I know you guys are feeling it. I know you guys, we talk about it all the time. Facebook post, what is the thing that stresses you out the most? Most everybody said bills, as if bills don't go anywhere. Like they just sit there. Somebody's getting paid off of bills. Somebody is not stressed out about bills. That money is being funneled. The thing that brings you the most stress, and this is across races, is the same thing that is getting, the largest wealth grab in the history of the world to become a material reality of ours. The life expectancy in China is now higher than in the United States. And we really have to be truthful with ourselves in order to fight against this type of repression. And so we're going to continue to talk about it. Thanks for joining. And, let's continue to work together. Please like, share, and subscribe. And, boycott the test, participate in general strikes, and continue to be in conversation. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.